everyone, and welcome to our first talk in our Alumni at Home with Mac webinar series. My name is Christine Kennedy, and on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement, I'd like to thank you for joining us to hear from Carla Labella, a McMaster graduate, Mohawk professor, and author of the recent book, The Wow Book, Ways of Optimizing Well-Being. Here it is, right here. Joining Carla for this evening's conversation on positive psychology is one of our favorite professors on campus, Dr. Joe Kim. I think he has been with us on every single At Home with Mac series, so we're so thankful that he is joining us again. Dr. Kim is from the Department of Psychology, Neuroscience and Behaviour. Before I begin and introduce our moderator, Dr. Kim, this evening, I'd like to take this time to recognize that McMaster's campus is currently on the traditional territory shared between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe Nations, which was acknowledged in the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. That wampum uses the symbolism of a dish to represent the territory and one spoon to represent that the people are to share the resources of the land and only take what they need. We always start our webinars with a land acknowledgement because we recognize it's important to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this land and the history they share with this land as a step towards reconciliation. So for everyone who is joining us from Canada, you know that we are in a deep chill, and here in Hamilton, it is very, very cold. Not as cold as it is in Winnipeg, though. I was listening to the current this morning, and it's very cold there. So we're very appreciative of you taking time out of your evening to join us today. Just a reminder, we are giving away 10 copies of Carla's book, and I'll contact those lucky winners tomorrow. So look in your inbox tomorrow morning. A reminder that this talk is being recorded, and you will receive an email within the link with the recording probably later this evening before midnight. And thanks to everyone who pre-submitted questions during the registration process. Carla and Joe are going to try to address most of those. And also, if you have a question that hasn't been addressed in the conversation this evening, please feel free to submit a question under Ask a Question section, and I'll pass those along to Joe. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator. Joe is moderating tonight, and then he will introduce Carla. Joe, as I mentioned, is a professor in the Department of Psychology, Neuroscience and Behaviour. So he has three major roles on campus. He is the director of the Education and Cognition Lab. He is the faculty director of the McCall-McBain Postdoctoral Fellows Teaching and Leadership Program. And he's the principal instructor of the innovative first-year psychology course, Mac Intro Psych. Joe is actively involved in the science of teaching and learning and organizes the annual Education and Cognition Conference. And I think I saw a few names who have attended that conference in the past. So thank you, Joe and Carla, for joining us this evening. And Joe, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Christine. It is a absolutely chilly evening tonight. Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you to the opening event for the At Home with Mac 2025 program, where we will be exploring unlocking ways to optimizing your well-being. So it's my pleasure to be your host for our event tonight, and it's been my pleasure to know our presenter this evening, Carla Labella, for over 20 years. We've played soccer together. We've been working together professionally through workshops, teaching, and conferences. And I want to tell you a little bit about Carla's academic background and her journey. So Carla Labella, she's a professor of psychology at Mohawk College. She studied positive psychology and earned a certificate in applied positive psychology at the Flourishing Center in New York City in 2014. She also became a Moda yoga teacher in 2022 and a unified mindfulness coach in 2021. She's the recipient of the Award for Excellence in Full-Time Teaching Local 240 in 2022 and the Jackie Candlish Award for Excellence in Suicide Prevention Work in 2019. And of course, most recently, after her years of hard work have culminated with all of her creativity in her debut book, The Wow Book, Ways of Optimizing Well-Being. So Carla's going to begin with giving us a short presentation to introduce the themes that have been developed in her book. Then we're going to engage in a fireside chat, followed by questions. Some questions have been pre-submitted from the audience, and we'll try to get to as many of the submitted questions from tonight as possible. So I'm going to pass you on to our speaker tonight, Carla Labella.
Thank you, Joe. I'm just going to see if I can share this presentation. So if you can let me know if you can see this. And from current slide. Can we see it? Okay, that is great. Thank you so much for that introduction, Joe. I'm really looking forward to our conversation after this mini presentation. I'd also like to thank Christine. Yeah, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to join all of you this evening. And after this was brought in front of me, we landed on this topic. There were so many things that I could talk about in this 1 hour. And we landed on unlocking ways to optimize your well-being. So when you look at my book, Ways of Optimizing My Well-being, I talk about a number of strategies that are related to living a good life. So a number of them are focused on the body, like, moving our body, getting some good sleep. There are some strategies that we can look at kind of more that engage the mind. So again, highlighting some of my training in mindfulness. My background is in cognitive psychology, just like Joe. So I'm very interested in how we can talk back to some of that mind chatter that really doesn't serve us. But other topics such as cultivating gratitude and self-compassion, and having a better relationship with our technology, which is really kind of part of moving towards goals that are really important to us. And outside of that, really wanting to emphasize the importance of connection in our lives. I don't think we put enough emphasis on that. We see a loneliness epidemic around us. And hopefully part of the strategies that we'll look at is how do we nourish those relationships? How do we make time for the people we care about? And as we are kind of envisioning what this good life looks like, really talking about discovering and living our purpose, whatever that looks like to you. And part of that is then highlighting, well, what are the behaviors that are aligned to that vision so that we can move towards what really matters to us. So given that there are a lot of topics in the book, I've decided to focus in on the very last section of the book, which is on looking at ways that we can go from knowing to doing. Because a lot of times when I'm presenting these topics, we know that we need good sleep, that we need to move our bodies, that these are strategies that are related to well-being. The struggle is really into making that happen. So how can we do that? When you get to the end of the day and you're tired and you just don't have energy, but you have, these wellness goals that you want to move your body, how can we make it likely to happen? So that's where we're going to concentrate our discussion. And part of that discussion is to identify some of the barriers that can get in the way. So I want you to reflect on, these questions here. When you think about what that good life looks like to you, what can get in the way of you achieving that best possible life? And why can it be so hard, a lot of the times? So a lot of times when I pose these questions in class and in community presentations, these are some of the common answers that come up. And again, a lot of them are very individual focused. But I also want to kind of span out and also kind of highlight the context. Because sometimes what is happening around us, if we're looking at globally what's happening, but maybe more so in our immediate environment, in our immediate circles, what is actually happening in those arenas that really get in the way of us moving towards goals that are important to us. So, and again, it's where we would, and beyond the scope of this discussion, but I do want to highlight, just some of those social determinants of health. If it's, mental health or physical health or experiences of oppression or discrimination or various insecurities. It could be job insecurity, food or housing insecurity. So these are real realities for many of us. So beyond some of the strategies that I will share with you, I want you to keep some of that in mind and reach out for support, because in addition to these strategies, sometimes we need those extra layers in order to make behavior change. So just like really quickly looking at some of these barriers that are quite common, feeling like you just don't have enough time. If I want to exercise and, perhaps have a yoga practice or whatever those wellness strategies are, just not having the time in the day. And sometimes that's related to not having energy. But I would really like you to reflect on, the activities that you are doing right now. And keep in mind that if we are looking to do more of these kinds of activities that are good for us, then something's got to give. Something has to come off of our schedule. So again, 24 hours, right? It's a zero-sum game. And we really need to do this kind of reflective work before we jump in to, trying to make these changes. The perception that self-care is selfish is often brought up. That, I've got really important work to do, if it's paid or unpaid work, right? If we're in a helping profession, if we're a parent or a caregiver, we sometimes see it as it's selfish to put some time into these activities. This quote that's on screen, I really like it. It's in my book. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. So again, one of the strategies in my book is around, talking back to your mind chatter and reframing, right? Shifting your perspective. And I think this is an opportunity here. So instead of seeing self-care as being selfish, we need to think about it as, I need to engage in these activities so I can put my best self out there, so that I can do the good work that I am doing and moving towards whatever that good life looks like to me. And the last one here is just kind of thoughts that can get in the way. Definitely one that would be relevant for this presentation is, I can't do this. So maybe you do have some kind of fitness goal in mind and you feel like, you don't have the capability, you don't have the skills in order to achieve that goal. So again, I think it's really important to identify what some of these barriers are so that we can work with them. Because what you're going to find is that as we go from knowing to doing, the planning is really a crucial part of this. Okay, so a couple of things to acknowledge here. If you're making any kind of behavior change, change is uncomfortable, right? If you have a whole lifetime of experience of, engaging in certain behaviors, maybe some of it is how you use your phones. Like that could be a place where you find some time for these kind of newer activities. But those kinds of activities are easy to do. Actually going outside and, putting those shoes on and getting out for a walk or a run, that's a tougher choice to make. And we really need to acknowledge that. As you can see on screen here, future me has one obstacle in its way. It's present me. So when you're thinking about what that best possible life looks like, looking and reflecting on future me, it's you right now getting in the way of it. It's you making that easier choice. So present me wants the immediate reward, right? What is easy to do? So it could be snacking, it could be skipping exercise, it could be scrolling through your phone, or whatever activity is easier for you to do. But for you to move in the direction that you want to move and to really see change, it's making those tougher choices now. When you feel like just sitting on the couch and scrolling your phone, how can you push through that feeling that you don't want to get outside and you actually get outside? So again, how do we work with some of these sometimes uncomfortable emotions, right? Some of this mind chatter that can take place, and actually make some change. So just to kind of share an example here, just because the planning phase is so important, do as much of the work upfront. Make it as easy as possible for you to actually start that behavior. So, and the other thing too, to highlight is to prioritize. Sometimes, when I'm teaching positive psychology and students are like, oh my gosh, I need to be doing, all of these things. I've got a list of 9 things that I want to change right now. You definitely don't want to aim to change, a number of things on that list. We need to prioritize. So pick 1 or 2 things, right? If you find that you're not getting good sleep, that is definitely something I would prioritize, because that is the game changer, right? You can look at Matt Walker's, book. I know he was a recent guest here, but yeah, sleep can actually seep into every crevice and change, how you're feeling in every single part of you. So sleep would be a good one. If you're looking at kind of moving your body, maybe start with 1 or 2 of these goals, and then looking at some of the other things that you want to do them a little bit later. We can stack them on once we have established some of these behavior changes. So just to kind of share, a recent example, I've been running for, I don't know if I would really say that I'm a runner, because I've taken some extended breaks, but there was definitely times in my life that I wouldn't even think twice about it. That alarm would go off. I was usually a morning runner, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was out the door within minutes. And again, that can be really hard, right? Your bed is warm, you're feeling comfortable, but what is it that made it easier for me to get out the door? And again, this is where the planning really helped me out here. So for me, the time was the cue, right? So 6 o'clock, that alarm went off. Everything was done for me. So I picked my clothes in the morning. I made sure I always had very good running shoes. If I was going to run, they were ready for me at the door. The only thing I had to do was put on my clothes. Sometimes I actually wore my clothes to bed. So even just to skip that step, make it even easier. Took a quick drink of water, and I went out the door. Another thing that made it easier for me to get out the door is I had someone to run with. So in terms of a tip, if you can have an accountability partner, that will definitely increase your likelihood of success. And again, you do it one day, then the next day, and before you know it, you're not even thinking about it. There were no decisions that needed to be made. So you can imagine if that alarm went off and I wasn't sure if I was going to run. Is that the exercise I'm doing right now? What's the route I'm going to take? What am I going to wear? Am I going to have to go into that closet to find those shoes? All of those kind of micro decisions actually cost energy and maybe enough of a barrier that you actually don't get out the door. So when you're reflecting on, some of the changes that you would like to see, think about that plan you have in place. What can you do upfront that will make it more likely that you engage in that behavior? The same as if you have, some nutrition goals. So if you want to eat more fruits and vegetables, one tip is actually to get everything ready when you get home from the grocery store. So when you are looking for that snack and you open that fridge and you see that bag of carrots that still needs to be washed and peeled and cut, that may be enough of a barrier that you grab that bag of potato chips. So what can you do early on that makes it more likely that you go for the healthier option? So, and one of the things that I do, I have a container that I cut all my vegetables up. I do it right away. It is in the fridge. So when I want that snack, and I don't always go for the vegetables, so I don't want you to think that 100% of the time when Carla needs a snack, it's always healthy, but it definitely increases the likelihood that I make the better choice. These are some other tips, and some of this comes from Charles Duhigg's work, so The Power of Habit. James Clear, Atomic Habits. So I'll just share some of them here. So believe that change is possible. So again, kind of looking at that mindset, sometimes, again, those things that we say to ourselves can get in the way, right, of you achieving those goals. I've highlighted having an accountability partner. So that could be someone who's actually doing that activity with you. That would be amazing if we had someone in our lives, right, that we can engage in these behaviors with. But it could also be someone on the outside, right? Someone who's going to hold you accountable. They're not doing it with you, but they're holding you accountable to that behavior. The other important tip is create the environment around you that is conducive to success. So, one of the things is if you are quite distracted by your phones, be aware of that. I had quite a bit of work to do today. So I actually didn't have my phone around me as I was doing that work. I kind of gave myself some breaks to kind of check in on my phone. A lot of people think that if they just have their phone and they just turn it over, that, it's not going to distract them. It's actually still a distraction, even if it's turned over. So if possible, get those distractions out of the way. And then again, think about the environment that you're creating around you so that you can be successful, right? If you're looking to get better sleep, what is that environment around you that you can get better sleep? Or if you're hoping to start a yoga practice, what does that space look like, right? So again, thinking about that physical environment. I've got some other ideas there, right? Hide the cookie jar. So again, having that out on a counter can be a temptation. Don't buy the cookies. So that would be another good thing. But sometimes we find ourselves, in situations like I can not bring sweets into my house. Maybe I don't have any alcohol into my house. And these are things that I don't want to consume. But, in the real world, maybe going to parties and outings, these things are available. So what can I do to, engage with the behaviors that I want to? So one of the things is to think about what those challenges are in advance, and then perhaps apply some implementation intentions. So when you're in a cold space, okay, it's cold here, but when you're in a cold space, you're not in that kind of hot environment where those temptations are there. Think about what you would do if you were in an environment like that. So, maybe those temptations are there, when you go to a restaurant. So if you are handed a dessert menu, so here's the if-then statement. If I get to the end of the meal, I am offered that dessert menu, then I will ask for an herbal tea instead. I'm not making the decision while in that hot space. That decision has already been made for me, and I'm just applying it in that situation. If I'm trying to drink less alcohol, now I'm at a party where alcohol is being served. Again, what is that if then? I'm thinking about it in that cold space. If I'm offered an alcoholic beverage, then I will ask for, some spritzer. So, and then when you're in that situation, again, kind of sticking to that plan. Another tip here is to attach a new habit to an existing one. So a behavior that you're already doing, so it's going to happen, can we attach a new behavior to it? So if you were looking to maybe start a short meditation, could you do so while you're waiting for your coffee to drip in the morning? Something else that you may be doing every day is, brushing and flossing your teeth. Would this be an opportunity to start, a gratitude practice? So you're already there, you're tied to your toothbrush, you're in front of that mirror. Can you think of, 3 to 5 items that you're grateful for, and think about why you're grateful for those items? So again, you're already engaging in this behavior and you're attaching a new one to it. Try to stick to your schedule, even in small ways. So for example, if you normally go for, a 45-minute walk after dinner, but tonight you're here with us. And again, part of this is the planning of it. Can you actually get that activity in earlier in the day, even in a small way? So maybe you don't have that full 45 minutes, but maybe you can get a 10-minute walk in at lunch. I did that today. So I knew I was not going to be, able to get outside this evening. And again, kind of stacking a few of these, I had a friend who was willing to do some yoga. So I couldn't do my full practice, but I got on the mat for 30 minutes. So instead of scrapping the entire behavior, can you do it in some small way? Creating rules is great as well. Perhaps checking your email 3 times a day. So when we're email is constantly open. You can see those notifications coming in, you going back and forth. So that attention kind of binging, to that email, back to your task and so on, you lose a lot of time. So give yourself certain times of the day that you will check your email, shut off your cell phone at 8 o'clock, maybe have some rules around, no technology at the dinner table. So rules can help us out in this regard. And again, don't forget to celebrate small wins. So even if it's just, I'm going for a walk after dinner, and every time that I do that, I'm going to reward myself in some small way. It could be having a piece of dark chocolate or, something else that you look forward to. But if you're working towards a bigger goal, let's imagine that you're training for, a 10-kilometer race. And you're not quite, getting there yet. You're kind of walking and running at this point, just kind of starting out in moving towards that goal. When you have something that is kind of a bigger goal for you, break it down into those smaller steps. And then once you kind of hit those sub goals, do something to celebrate that. So again, reward yourself along the way. Some final reminders here. So self-compassion is definitely a big topic when I teach positive psychology. Just be kind to yourself. So you're going to slip up. Perhaps it's not going to be that every day you're going to get out and get that activity in as you have planned. Just be kind to yourself around that. We all struggle from time to time. And here's the piece where we want to shift our perspective, right? Trying to do a reframe. What appears to be a person problem, right? I don't have willpower, it's about me. It's actually often a process problem. So come back to the drawing board, right? Look at your plan and then set yourself up for success. That is it.
Thanks so much, Carla.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I'm speaking with the author of a book, the first thing that comes to my mind is that, so you're writing about all of these really important lessons.
Yeah.
But if I can turn the tables, are you living the lessons in this book that you've written?
Currently? I probably would answer that question differently if you had asked me even a few weeks ago. So I came out of a very busy term. I was definitely not, especially in the time that I was writing this book. I was not living it, which was very frustrating, right? And it kind of reinforces what I'm saying. It's like, we know better, right? And a lot of times, like, we teach the stuff, this is how you can live a good life. And then you're living in a very unsustainable way, and you're dragging yourself, through those days. So I went through a long period of time, definitely through up until the publication of the book. And then for a period of time afterwards, I was dealing with some sleep deprivation as well. That wasn't helping. Since I've left a role that I've had at the college for the last couple of years, which took up a lot of my time, and I was kind of forced to make some changes. I just wasn't doing well as we were coming into the Christmas holidays. I have been making some of those changes, but it's definitely been more recent. Part of it was just changing what my work looks like. I'm back to full-time teaching, which actually full-time teaching was less work for me. And I'm doing what I love to do, which is teaching. And I'm really trying to do some of these good things. I'm forcing myself to get onto this mat. When I'm not feeling like it, it's pushing through that. I can't remember if I mentioned the 2-minute rule, which is part of James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. He talks about the 2-minute rule. Make sure that it's easy to start that new behavior. So you may not feel like getting out for that 45-minute walk that you have planned. Can you just get yourself out the door in 2 minutes? Can you get that behavior started? Putting those shoes on, walking out the door, even for me in my head, just get to that stop sign. And like, I'll say to myself, like, if you get to that stop sign and you really don't want to do this walk or this run, just turn around and come right back home. What I find is once the shoes are on, once I'm out there, I just keep on going. So the hardest part of any behavior is just getting it started. How can you push through that? You may want to journal or write a book, right? Yeah, you might not be very motivated to do that, but can you give yourself 2 minutes? Can you say, I'm going to take out a blank piece of paper and I'm going to write for 2 minutes? You may find that it's much easier to get right past that and you just keep on writing. So work with that period of time, push through what's uncomfortable and just get it started. It's half the battle.
Yeah, I think like how you mentioned about even setting up the environment, like having your shoes, your whatever you need to do your exercise or your run ready, because I think if you think, okay, I think I'll go for a run, and then like, well, I don't even know where my shoes are. Where's my like jacket? It's cold. Forget it. Uh,
Yep.
so I think setting yourself up for success is really important.
Yeah, do the planning beforehand. It's all of those like little micro decisions. You may not think that it's much. Okay, so I need to find an outfit to go out for my run. Maybe I don't know exactly where I'm going. Like do all the thinking work beforehand. So all you have to do is just go right out the door. Once you kind of get that cue, if it is that alarm going
Get rid of
off.
those excuses before that they can even become relevant.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So that connects to a question that someone submitted just about procrastination in general. Why are we so prone to procrastination? And I think you started getting into a little bit about how we could
Yeah.
get out of being stuck in this unmotivated inaction. But why are we so prone to procrastination?
Yeah, so procrastination is a very big topic. So it could be a variety of reasons. Um, Sometimes it can actually be linked to perfectionism. So, depending on how high the bar is that you're setting for yourself, if you feel like you're not going to meet that, you're just like, okay, I'm just not going to do it at all without thinking, what does just progress, moving in that direction of, living a healthier life. And again, being more specific with what those goals are, um, and, and not letting yourself kind of get in the way of that. Sometimes it's really us, right? It's that kind of mind chatter that we're working with. Like if I can't do it perfectly, if I can't put the most amazing manuscript out or the most amazing book out there, it's just not going to happen. And believe me, like putting this book together, you had to like rip it out of my hands because, I would read a new article and there was something new that I was learning. And it's like, I need to put it in here. And that was one of the things that, the individuals who were supporting me with this process, it's like, you've got to get to a certain point where it's good enough. Right. And I really had to embrace that. And it's very hard as being someone who's very perfectionistic to be okay with good enough. So,
So
yeah.
you mentioned like a few weeks ago, if I had asked you the question of if you're following your own lessons, um, even from a few weeks ago, there was a bit of a transition. So
Mhm.
there's a question from Heather online, and she said, what are your recommendations to get back into positive routines when you've been in a slump, maybe coming back from the holidays, or maybe it's a particularly busy season? Like that's what I experienced in the fall term. Is it a matter of fake it until you make it, where you force yourself into doing it until it feels natural, or is there something else we should be doing?
Yeah, no, that's the term that you want to use for it. It's pushing through what that barrier is, right? And it's not comfortable, like especially at this time of year. It's cold outside. There's a number of reasons we can come up with why, we don't want to go outside if that's the behavior change that we have in mind. Yeah, but part of it is pushing through it. Kind of the unfortunate thing when we think about our energy, and we can think about like the different types of energy, right, that we do have, is really to kind of take inventory on the activities that we're doing that replete that energy source and sources, and ones that deplete us,
Mm.
right? And sometimes what I find is, we know these things are good for us, like if it's, exercising or maybe having a meditation practice. Um, but again, like how do we kind of make those things happen when you just don't feel like it? And part of it is trying to keep motivated as you're waiting to see those changes down the line. If So this is the thing, when we're looking at kind of present me, right, and future me, right? Future me can feel like so far away. Like if I'm going to start, walking or running now, if what we would really see is, okay, I'm going to go walking outside for 45 minutes and my body is transformed. I am stronger. Like I can look in the mirror and it's like, wow, look at that. Like I see these changes. That might be very motivating. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this. I just did this behavior for 45 minutes and wow, this is what I'm seeing already. But that's often not what happens. I hope people find the experience maybe to be rewarding, right, at the end of that walk.
Mhm.
But a lot of times you're not going to see, physical changes, for example. But over time, when you make that consistent, you will. So it's really trying to work with keeping ourselves motivated, pushing through, not wanting to engage in that behavior, and then actually seeing some results, which you may have to wait like months to see. The same when you're looking at diets, like a lot of the things that we make resolutions around at this time of year. Yeah, it's related to these activities, but we don't see results right away, right? So how do we make this kind of a consistent behavior, make those better choices now so that you can see those results down the
It sounds
line?
like you have to understand what actual progress is. So if you're in a slump,
Mm-hmm.
maybe just getting out and walking to the end of the block in this freezing cold and then coming
Mm-hmm.
back, maybe just writing one paragraph
Yeah.
is progress and
Yeah.
then building on that. So I guess that's kind of like the fake it till you make it. Like you're making some progress. It's
Yeah. And I
a home
guess,
run.
yeah, and thinking about kind of like the slump and, maybe it's hard to get out there. What's going to make it easier? So I did talk about the planning, but okay, like what do I need to wear so that it is more comfortable for me to get out there? So do I have the outerwear, right? That will just make this a little bit more comfortable. Can I grab a friend, and engage in this activity with? So doing some of that planning, this is a tough thing for me to do, acknowledge that, but what's going to make it a little bit easier? And then again, if some of the things to maybe highlight is how can you reward yourself? So maybe I'm not going to have that snack, or I'm not going to, maybe you have like, I remember when I was, trying to start getting back into running, I would have like this like body scrub that I would have in the shower, and I would only use it if I did a really good run. So, what are some of the ways that we can reward ourselves so that we want to do those activities? So I don't know if that is
Okay.
helpful there.
So kind of follow up here. So what if you're
Mhm.
trying to do this? You're trying to make some progress, but
Yep.
you experience some setbacks. That could be
Hmm.
kind of demotivating. You feel like you're doing the right things, but you have these
Hmm.
setbacks and progress feels like it's out of reach. What do you
Yep.
suggest people do to try to overcome that feeling?
Yeah. I would say kind of get curious around what is happening there. Part of it too, like if you're finding that I really want to start writing, right? And like I said, try to kind of push through it. Can you write for 2 minutes and see if, you extend that time? But also kind of reflect on, what times of the day am I on? Right. This is actually a very hard time for me. Like the evenings, for some people, they're invigorated at night. This is a time where I'm often getting ready to to go to bed. So, if there's the possibility of kind of thinking about what your day looks like and you have more energy in the morning, maybe try to do that activity in the morning if you have flexibility in your schedule. So just kind of getting curious with that. If you're bumping up against some things with that activity, is it the activity? Is it the time of day that I'm engaging in that activity? And kind of, being a little scientist there and experimenting with some of that.
Yeah, like so for example, for me, I like to go running in the afternoon because I
Mm-hmm.
find that's when I have like a lull in my
Mm-hmm.
energy and ability to pay attention. And then it's
Oh,
kind of a good time for me to actually squeeze in a run if I can, depending on
right.
my work schedule for the day. And that to me, I find to be the most refreshing thing to do.
Yeah. So, and again, like whatever that cue is, like for you, it's, you know that this can be kind of invigorating. So that is your cue to kind of get out. For others, if you're finding it's really hard to engage in that behavior, try to time it at a time of the day when you feel like you have the more, more energy to do that. But I really think that we need to kind of look overall and look at the activities that we're doing. Are we trying to do too much?
Mm.
And again, the phone, like my phone's not near me right now, but take a look at how much time you're spending on your phones, right? Because trying to put more things into your schedule, something's got to give. And definitely don't take it away from your sleep. Okay.
So when we think about improving our wellness,
Mhm.
there are things that maybe we want to start doing and some things we want to stop doing. So
Yes.
Pamela asks a really interesting question. Are there
Okay.
different strategies for starting something, for example, exercising more, versus stopping something, for example, checking your phone constantly?
Yeah, and so Charles Duhigg in his book, is it The Power of Habit? Anyways, it's a great book. I read it a little while ago, but a lot of the strategies that I've shared are from his book. He really dissects the habit, right? And this habit model. And he has a section on creating new behaviors and also changing behavior. So it is a little bit different. Like we can look at kind of both, but it's kind of understanding this model here, where you have the cue, you have the routine, and then you have the reward. So if, for example, you're trying to change a behavior, maybe it's something that you don't want to be engaging in. And whatever that might be, it might be like kind of a bad habit you have. Maybe it is that you're, drinking an alcoholic beverage or some other way that you're coping with some strong emotion. Kind of dissect that behavior. So the behavior is the routine, right? That you're drinking, for example. But what's the cue to it? Right. And getting really curious as to what is cueing the behavior and what's the reward that you're getting from engaging in that behavior.
Hmm.
And when you're looking at making behavior change, you want to keep your cue and the reward, but change the behavior. Like, what else could I do when I'm getting home from work and I'm feeling, really charged up? It's been a tough day, and it's kind of a habit that I grab this drink. What else could I do that I still get the reward, right? That it helps, if it's helping to calm me down, whatever that reward is. You want to keep that cue and reward, but change that, what you're doing in the middle. So, yeah, it can be slightly kind of different things in terms of how to think about creating new habits versus changing something that you're doing. But it's really kind of understanding cue, routine, and reward. It's a great book.
I like that. So
Yeah,
it's like being mindful and really paying attention to the mechanisms driving your own behavior
yeah,
and then
yeah.
enacting that change systematically.
Well, and it's that self-awareness, because
Mhm.
sometimes we're engaging these behaviors and we're not even clear as to why we're doing it. Charles Duhigg does share his example where, in the middle of the afternoon, he kept on eating chocolate chip cookies, right? And he got really curious as to why he was doing it. He said he had gained like 10 pounds, right, eating all of these cookies. And he just started kind of experimenting with things around, when 3 o'clock came and he would eat the cookie, he would try, different kinds of behaviors. Like, was it really about the cookie? Could he eat something else? At the end of the day, like when he kind of looked at, all of the, like what this model looked like, he realized it had nothing to do with the cookie. He just wanted to take a break and to socialize with friends, and he ended up losing weight because of it. So I think a lot of times we just engage in these behaviors kind of mindlessly.
Yeah.
But again, can we kind of bring more of that kind of critical lens to it, and maybe evoke some behavior change?
Okay, there's an interesting question from Victor, like taking a step back, and I'll just add my own 2 cents. Like maybe like since the pandemic, I feel like there's like with like conflicts in the world, political polarization, against this entire backdrop, how do we achieve a sense of peace and fulfillment during these difficult, challenging times?
Do I have another hour to answer that? Yeah, it's a big question. Um, and, I was trying to touch upon that question when looking at some of these barriers. I know I was talking to a friend today, and it's like, well, it's easy. It's easy to get out to do that run or to do that behavior when you're feeling good, right? It's tough when you're not feeling so good. And sometimes what is happening around us really does get in the way. Um, Part of what I try to emphasize in positive psychology, and I think it's a misconception out there. It's not about being happy all of the time. It's not about putting blinders that there are real issues that are happening. Like, I had to work with some pretty tough emotions, like these last kind of 24 hours, right? Just seeing my friends, right, being impacted with layoffs and impending layoffs. It's really hard. And I'm definitely high in empathy, so I kind of feel what's happening around me. And even just kind of looking at globally, how are we affected with what's happening on that stage? So I do have some strategies in the work in the book about how we can kind of better work with that. If it's some of that mind chatter, if it's some of these tough emotions. If you do feel that kind of consuming like a lot of news is really bringing you down, maybe think about that. Like, can you maybe read some of these articles? I'm not saying ignore it. Like, it's not about denial, but if you're really noticing that you're spending a lot of time consuming those news articles and it's bringing you down, maybe consume those articles, but spend less time doing that.
Or maybe also choose when to consume that.
Maybe. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think the worst time to do it is right
Mhm.
before you go to bed, or even
Yeah.
worse,
That's,
lying in bed and
yeah,
start, doom scrolling all of
of
these
course.
conflicts into your brain, winding yourself up when you should be winding yourself down.
Exactly. Yeah. So definitely, think about what you're taking in. But at the end of the day, like, these are upsetting things that are happening around us. So how can we better show up? And part of positive psychology is really about kind of building our toolbox, right? We're not trying to get rid of our experience with tough emotions or with some of this mind chatter. It's going to be there. But
Mm.
how do we work with that? So if it's from kind of more of a cognitive perspective where you identify some of these thoughts and talk back to it, that can be helpful for some individuals. But in the last number of years, I've kind of grown my mindfulness practice. So
Mm.
just kind of giving myself some pause, right? Giving myself some space to work with some of these challenging emotions and thoughts, just changing our relationship to what might be happening kind of within our bodies and around us. So there are some tools that can be helpful.
I
Yeah.
love this. I love this comment from Quinn. I think it's
Okay.
very authentic, and it probably captures what many of us are thinking. So here's what he says. Look, I'm aware of the things I need to get done, and I even have a will and want to achieve these new habits or chores. I agree with you. I agree with everything that you're saying. But I seem to just accept that I don't want to do it when the time comes, or I make up some sort of excuse. And they might be legitimate excuses. I'm busy, I'm tired, I have a million other things to do. So then I get frustrated with myself afterwards every time, and I feel this feeling of guilt and regret. I should be doing these things. So, what are some ways to push through these negative thoughts?
So again, part of it is to highlight that 2-minute rule, right? The hardest part of any behavior is just getting it started. So put the planning in place. What can you do to make that happen? Um, the other thing is just to kind of reframe things as well. So if you're seeing it as a chore to doing some of these new behaviors and things that you kind of avoid, um, changing your language around it. Maybe it's not so much, oh, I have to do this, this is part of what I have planned, but I get to do this. Like, I have a healthy body here. I have the ability to get outside and get out for that walk, or to, if you're thinking about like even some chores around your house, like you get to do this, being in a place of privilege. Again, you're still engaging in those behaviors, you're folding your clothes, you're doing things that have to get done, but can you approach a task that you're not looking forward to, and just kind of have that different frame for it, bringing some gratitude into a practice. So I do a lot of things just around language, right? Sometimes, students are sharing things, I am lazy, or, and again, picking up on some of those things that you say to yourself. So I think part of what you said there was, I should be doing this. There's a lot of guilt around that. Again, have some self-compassion around it. I give every student in my class at the beginning of the term a little card, and it says, "Don't shit on yourself." So when you think about some of the mind chatter that you get stuck on, yeah, that can get in the way, right? So yeah, just recognizing some of that. But again, do the planning. And when you don't feel like doing it, do it anyways. Okay. And make it as easy as possible to do it.
So speaking of mind chatter and like the tough inner critic, um, can you talk about maybe meditation and like how we can use meditation, perhaps some other strategies to kind of overcome this
Yeah.
constant noise and chatter that, so many of us
Sure.
experience in our minds?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's some common things. Sometimes we talk to ourselves in ways that we would never talk to somebody else. So how can we just even like notice that that is what we're doing, and also the connection to how we're feeling. So when we are having these thoughts and they can be really sticky, yeah, how is that showing up, in our bodies? So you were talking about a meditation practice. So one of the things with meditation, if you are like sitting on a mat or however you may meditate, is, are you kind of growing a practice that you then can take with you off of the mat? So when these things happen, maybe things are happening in the world and it's how you're responding to it so that you are less reactive. You can maybe over time, as you grow your practice, see those little shifts. Can you find a little bit more space with how you work with a challenging emotion or some of that mind chatter? So yeah, there's different approaches with how we can work with this. So again, from more of my background, it's from a cognitive perspective, it's identifying those thoughts and talking back to it, shifting our perspective. One of the things that I try to remind myself of, I don't know if you can see it on my bookshelf, but Thich Nhat Hanh, asks the question, "Are you sure?" And sometimes we have these thoughts and we don't even stop and reflect. So all of a sudden, something maybe unfortunate has happened, or maybe not. And we catastrophize, oh my gosh, this is going to mean, these big things are going to happen and it's going to affect all these people. And, this is going to be the consequence of it. Can you just pause in that and just ask yourself, are you sure? Right? A lot of what that kind of causes some of those edgy emotions are actually the things that we create. It may start with a little thought, and all of a sudden, as the storytellers that we are, we weave an entire story around that. And what could have just been a thought that could just maybe recognize and just say, there's a thought, it's just a thought. Learn to let go of that thought.
Yeah.
So again, changing that relationship with it, you've now just enmeshed yourself with it. And, it's just kind of growing and growing, and having more of an impact on how you are feeling.
Yeah, I think catastrophizing can really feed into anxiety.
Oh,
And
yeah.
a useful exercise that I heard was if you're thinking about the current situation, is it going to matter 5 minutes from now? Is it going to matter a day from now? Is it
Yep,
going to matter a week from now, a year from now? And usually the answer is no, not at all. I'm not going to even think about
exactly.
this. So why am I going to invest this emotion and thought
Mhm.
into blowing this up right now? It serves absolutely no purpose.
Yep. Yeah, and I just even use a longer time frame when I'm finding that I'm working with an edgy emotion. So, when I'm on my rocking chair, I hope I do get there one day. You know, am I going to be so bothered about what's going on right now? It may feel like it's the only thing, you're so zoomed into it, but zoom out and that time shift can be very helpful. Yeah.
So, let me end things with a really easy question, Carla.
Okay.
What does it mean to what does it mean to you to create a life worth living?
What an easy question, hey?
Really easy.
Very easy. Okay. Um, a life worth living. Yeah, it's a big one. I actually challenge my students to answer that question. Like, what does that good life mean to you? I think for me, it's living my values, speaking my truth, um, doing, I hope, what is good work, if it's in my classroom or in the community, and just making sure that I'm well resourced to do that. So I'm really committed. I know last year, 2024, it was going to be my year. This was my year. This book was coming out. I had an age milestone. I was super excited about 2024. And it was one of the toughest years that I've ever experienced. So with this year, I'm hoping, the good life is just putting more time into me, and just kind of pushing through and making sure I'm doing things that I know are good for me, um, and just get started with it, and hopefully seeing some of those results. I'm already seeing it, so it's good. And again, once you get your sleep back on track, it's upwards from there.
So it's okay to invest in your self-care for 2025.
Of course, it's okay. You should. So
Well,
you should on yourself on that one. Yes. Invest in yourself.
Well, Carla, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you as always. And thank you, everyone online for joining us. And don't miss our next talk, which is tomorrow night on achieving happiness and health in just 10 minutes a day. On behalf of McMaster University, thank you so much for joining us and have an amazing evening. Bundle up, have some hot chocolate with dark chocolate because it's healthier, right? You deserve it. And tell someone that you love them.
Great. Thank you.